Hi, this is the Magnificent Midlife Podcast, and I'm Rachel Lancaster. This is where we celebrate women in midlife and beyond. We challenge the status quo and bash those negative stereotypes about being an older woman. We're not over the hill at 40, 50, 60. We're just getting started, and the world needs us now more than ever. I'll be talking all things midlife, about issues that matter, and sharing fabulous stories of amazing women doing very cool stuff. Now is our time. I'm impossibly excited today to introduce my 5 guests on the podcast. I can't quite believe I've managed to get all of these magnificent women on one call, but here we are. So this is going to be the MenoClarity podcast on Magnificent Midlife, and we're here to tell you about what MenoClarity is all about, why we're involved in it. And with me, I have Kate Codrington.
Hello.
I have Professor Joyce Harper.
Hi.
I have Pat Duckworth.
Hi.
I have Clarissa Kristjansson. Hello. And I have Anne-Marie McQueen.
Hello.
Hello, ladies.
Hello.
Hi.
First of all, I'm going to start off with the big question. So why are we doing MenoClarity? Why have we come together, and what is MenoClarity all about? Joyce, let me come to you first.
So, unfortunately, we have a lot of myths around menopause. Actually, we have a lot of myths around reproductive health in general. And we wanted to debunk those myths. We want to make sure that we can educate women, support women through the perimenopause and menopause and beyond, and that we can let them know that they're individuals, and we can help them understand what the evidence is for some of the myths that are being generated around the perimenopause and menopause.
Anne-Marie, I know that myths is very important to you because you're a journalist. So how do you feel about all this?
So when I started Hot Flash Inc. on my own in the pandemic, I've been doing it in my apartment. You know, I even a couple of years before that, I thought there's a real narrative here. And as I dove in, particularly in the UK, I was like, this is not going in a good direction. There is just, this conversation is being hijacked. And when I started seeing menopause should be rebranded as a disease, it's talked about as a deficiency. I was personally like appalled and bothered by it, but I thought I was the only one. And then I started interviewing a few people, and they would say, I don't like it either. This menopause revolution has sort of very unappealing aspects to it, and it's going in the wrong direction. And so slowly, this is just the most beautiful thing. We start having little conversations on the side, and then it's like, no, a lot of people feel this way. This is not how we are experiencing menopause. Yes, it's not easy, but so we need to, I'm always looking for the true truth. And then I found all these people who are also looking for it. So that's just, they filled my heart with joy.
Clarissa, I can see you've been nodding your head as Anne-Marie was talking. How do you feel about it?
You know, Rachel, you and I had a conversation about this polarized world back a couple of years ago on the podcast. And I think for me, it's this misinformation, polarization, asking women to be in this camp or that camp, that really for me is not what the whole thing is about. And that sets up fear amongst women. And I think we have a great role as a diverse group of women to make women feel safe and heard, and that their individual journey is theirs and is true, irrespective of which camp wants to pull you in different directions. So that's what I feel this week of women bring to the conversation.
And Pat, you've been talking about menopause for a very long time, haven't you? How have you seen things change in recent years?
Oh my goodness. I used to think, if only people could talk about menopause, and I've got to the stage now of, please stop talking about menopause. But, you know, I've got a very selfish reason for loving MenoClarity, which is, you know, 13 years talking about this subject and it's sounding like I was in an echo box. And then just like, it's so lovely to have other women who have a balanced approach, who want to help to educate women and help them on their journey. So very selfishly, I love that. I love having you all as my menopause sisters. And also this whole bit about women looking for trusted sources of information. Who can you trust? And you kind of get to that point where you think, I really need to find out about this. And you start looking around and you get conflicting information, and it's everybody's individual journey. You have to find the thing that works for you. But where do you find the trusted sources? So that's why MenoClarity is important on the larger scale to me.
And Kate, I know it's terribly important to you too, and I'm so pleased that we've connected, because you weren't in my sphere, I don't think, when I sort of started all of this, but you definitely are now. So tell me, what does it mean for you?
Well, when I was in my late 30s, perimenopause hadn't been invented yet. You know, I'd never really heard that word.
You're not alone.
Peri what? You know. And I think that I got what I wanted. What I wanted was to have perimenopause and menopause, a discussion on the street for ordinary people. And when I last got my car serviced, the booking guy and the woman in the office were indeed talking about hot flushes, and I did a big noisy messy dance right there and then. But what has happened is that it's like the humans love negativity. We get excited by that. We're wired to stay alert for danger. And that means that once with the awareness is raised, we look for the negativity. And this has, as many people have said, has overtaken the narrative. But there is also actually a quite quiet but huge number of people, a great number of people who believe two impossible things at the same time, often before breakfast, that menopause and perimenopause can be challenging and also growthful. That we can have both, that we can meet the challenges with a growthful and positive mindset, both together. And that's what I think the voice that we have as MenoClarity is, a voice of integration.
Yeah.
So if there's one thing or I've got a list of 20 probably things I want to change through MenoClarity, what does anybody particularly want to change? I'll come to Clarissa first on this one.
Oh, stop blaming everything that's not going right in midlife on menopause. It does not exist in a vacuum. We have context. Context is everything. There's a cultural, there's a political, and there's your intergenerational trauma and baggage that you've got with you. And all of those things are going to impact the experience that each individual has. And so we have to, as a group, bring that forth in our discussions, and we do individually and collectively make sure that it's grounded in more than this symptom and that symptom, because it is just not only a physical experience.
Joyce, what do you most dislike? What do you want to change?
I'm sorry, I have two things. So the negativity...
You can have as many as you like.
I'll just do two. The negativity, that it's all doom and gloom. So we're talking about it, but I think we're doing a huge injustice to women of all ages, and we're putting fear in younger women that this terrible thing's going to happen to them, this really terrible thing. And when you talk to a woman in their early 40s and say you might be perimenopausal, they're, no, it can't be, no, please don't tell me. So I think that's a disaster and really unfair to everybody. And the second thing is the total lack of education. We're not taught about it in schools. We're not taught about it anywhere. So women are going into this like going into a black hole with no understanding. So many women suffer for years without joining the dots. They think they're going mad. They may well leave their partner. They shout at everybody. They don't really know what's going on. And they really worry. They're really concerned that something terrible is going to happen to them. And if they understand it's the perimenopause and hopefully it will be a transient stage, then I think that's much better. So those two things, lack of education and negativity.
Pat, what about you?
Yeah, I'm nodding away here because, all of that. And I'd like to change some of the vocabulary around it. It's really hard to find positive words to say around menopause. And menopausal is often used as like an insult. Oh, she's a menopausal woman. What does that mean? What's the point of that? To the extent that when I wrote my first book and I called it Hot Women Call Solutions, and people would laugh, but at least they're laughing if we call them hot women. And women are like, oh, I'm okay with that. I can be a hot woman. So finding the words instead of these kind of medical words around insufficiency and, premature ovarian failure, these words that get applied to women that make us feel like we've done something wrong and that somehow menopause is wrong rather than being a natural stage of life, which, if you believe some commentaries, is how we became really the most dominant species on the planet because we had a menopause. I think that is a much better narrative around it. And so if you say to women, well, you're entering into your inner crone. Oh, I don't want to be a crone. That sounds awful. All the words that have been applied to women in their post-reproductive stage have just become so negative. And I'd really like some more positive words, even if we've got to invent them. Let's start with inventing a vocabulary that women go, yeah, I'll embrace that. That sounds like a good thing.
Kate, you've been nodding.
Yeah, well, there's second spring, and that's, as
Exactly.
Clarissa knows, it's not a new thing. Traditional Chinese medicine have been using that for thousands of years. And from my perspective, we enter into a second cycle of life. The thing I'd like to change, okay, I'm going to go for two. I'm going to try and be really concise. Try really hard. The first is to change the narrative of our energy and lives as linear, from linear to cyclical. That our changing energy, our capacity to engage with the world and withdraw into ourselves is natural, and it just happens all the time. And that the desire to withdraw, the desire to care for ourselves is essential and cyclical and will come and go. And that opens up into my larger point that this time of vulnerability, because we're more sensitive and more vulnerable, is natural, and it comes and goes through our lives, through our menstrual cycles. We're set up for this by our menstrual cycles. So our body already knows how to do it. But if the world, like the whole world, could embrace their own vulnerability, if we could allow everyone to be vulnerable and sensitive, menopause wouldn't even be an issue. It would be a little blip, because we'd already be caring for ourselves and each other and our communities at times of sensitivity and vulnerability. And that's big picture social stuff.
I love that because, as Tanya says a lot, and you say a lot, Tanya, you couldn't be with us today, but she's another member of our group, that menopause is this sensitive time, isn't it? And it's a time like puberty, like pregnancy and childbirth, when we have to take extra care of ourselves. And it's when we don't do that that we can get into trouble. So, Anne-Marie, what bugs you? What would you like to change?
Well, that vulnerability piece is huge. Women who aren't able to be vulnerable are the ones who bite back whenever you mention that this is a vulnerable time, right? And that's just like something I notice all the time on social media. You just get those people who can't handle it in themselves. It's really remarkable. I would love to change so much of the misinformation that's stated as fact and repeated over and over and over and becomes an illusory truth. Like, this just started happening. We just started going through menopause. We used to die at 50. No, only whales go through it. menopause is a straight line to disease, and hormone therapy will fix it, and hormone therapy will help you live longer. Like, we hear these over and over and over repeated by people who've gotten into the business of this, and they're influencers, and they just repeat what they've heard. And then we see doctors on social media, I call them Dr. Menopause Gurus, who repeat it because it plays and it sells. And social media is about repetition. And if I had my way, I don't think I'd have an oversight body for doctors on social media. I think they should be watched. I think they need to be monitored, because they're a big part of the problem, and I don't know what to do about it. When you have 1 or 2 million followers and you're repeating this kind of crap, and people are hanging on your every word, and it really bothers me when people are just following one doctor. So definitely all that misinformation stuff. And it's difficult to correct because it involves a lot of nuance, and nuance doesn't play on social media or in media for that matter. So this is difficult work. And I just want, I think everyone's missing the point when they focus on that with these. This is the grandest opportunity. And that doesn't mean it's a overwhelmingly positive thing, but we have to examine everything at this point: health, bio, psychosocial, all of it, so that we can sort of move into the next phase. And I know, even when I didn't know I was in perimenopause, I know the things that I addressed during that time were valuable for me and necessary for me. And the things I'm addressing now are valuable for me and necessary for me. And I mean health and my own mind and my past experiences. So, looking at this as, let's take this and use it to grow and become happier, healthier old ladies. I wish that wasn't lost so much.
I'm going to add my 2 penneth here, and it's that I want to change this notion that the default woman is a reproductive woman, and that the other stages of the other stages of womanhood are not as valid as the default stage. Yeah. And that if we assume that the default stage of womanhood is a reproductive woman, then we're deficient before we go through puberty as much as being deficient after puberty.
Yeah, and the rest of our life is therefore worthless.
Yes, that we are only valuable to society when we are able to reproduce, whether or not we reproduce or not, But I can't bear this idea. Yeah. And Pat, you were alluding, I think, to Susan P. Matten's book, The Slow Moon Rises, about how she's done a complete review of menopause through history, and through millennia, the grandmother hypothesis stacks up, that menopause was actually good for the evolution of the species. And I just I'll go for that. I don't care about the evidence. I'll have that one.
Yeah, I'm buying into that 100%.
Yeah. But this idea that, we're not as valid as we were post-menopause unless we have our full complement of sex hormones as a reproductive woman, whereas actually the body has a plan. The body gives us the hormones that we're supposed to have for a post-reproductive life. We're not supposed to have the same complement of hormones as we go all the way through life. And some of us were lucky enough to be at the British Standards Institute launch last week, weren't we? And it was lovely to see everybody. But one of the comments there was that, we've probably had 37 years as reproductive people, and post-menopause, hopefully, we might well have 37 odd years as not reproductive people. So therefore, it makes a complete nonsense of this idea that there's this one default. Anyway, I'll get off my soapbox now, but there's just it's so annoying, isn't it?
No, you're so right. And this whole idea that somehow we're unwell post-menopause, and yet strangely we live longer than men. So even though we're so weak and helpless, we're still able to keep going. It's a very strange story that we're told.
And it doesn't empower women, does it? That is not a narrative that's going to help anybody.
But it's not meant to in a patriarchal society. That's the whole thing, that while patriarchy remains so dominant, it's colonized women to the extent that we've ripped away the feminine, the healing of the masculine and feminine inside the women. And what we're left with is then you're only valuable when we can impregnate you, we can control you, have power over you. And that is what we as a generation are pushing back on. Our grandmothers, great-grandmothers and beyond have lived to be 80 and 90, but we have really very little concept of what their lives were like, except that they were consistently probably pushed down and shamed possibly for who they were and what they were, whereas we have this opportunity to change this narrative now.
And I think there's something that we often forget is that we're all good daughters of the patriarchy. You know, we all of us, even us, dare I say, marinate in the belief that we're not good enough. So it's hard work, and it takes consciousness and focusedness and clear voices to see what's going on.
Joyce, do you want to add anything at this stage?
No, just that. It's always 2 steps forward, 1 step back, isn't it? And, you know, we have got this situation now, and certainly in the UK, that we're all talking about the menopause. And I've now, after I've interviewed Marika Big, who's written a book called This Won't Hurt, about how through history we've really not even done research on women because we're so complicated. So I'm sure anyone that drives a car will be aware that the seatbelt doesn't fit. You know, how heart attacks happen in women and men are different. Apparently there's a new app and it doesn't register a woman's heart attack as a heart attack. So, you know, the list goes on. Marika and I talked about sexy science, and I think menopause now is pretty sexy. It's out there. Everyone's talking about it. And as Clarissa said, everyone's blaming it for everything as well. You know, I had a long conversation with a friend recently who's one of their relatives committed suicide. Oh, was it because she was 50? They actually said, was it the menopause? So, you know, the list goes on and on. But it is crazy. We're at 2023. We have so many unanswered questions. So even if we think about what is a menopausal symptom, you know, what's we should say perimenopausal symptom. But anyway, what are the symptoms? We still don't know. We're still messing around with different doses of HRT, which really is treating women as guinea pigs. We don't really know what we're doing. We don't know the long-term consequences because we keep changing everything. So there's so much unknown. It's unbelievable. But hopefully now funding will be put into perimenopause and menopause research, and hopefully we will get answers to some of these questions.
I think that's it, isn't it? Certainly what annoys me when people make promises about HRT especially and say that it will do this and it will do that and the long-term implications of this and we need to have it for our long-term health. Well, I'm always thinking, well, what about, you know, the women in the blue zones? They didn't get their long life and health because they took hormone therapy. And are we now also, what really worries me is that we're technically saying that, you know, females can go on hormones when they hit puberty to manage their periods or their acne or just to make puberty easier. And then they stay on hormones until they die, which basically fundamentally says that as a female, you're faulty and you need to be on something synthetic to make you better throughout your life, which I think is just such a dangerous place for us to be in. And it goes back to that, you know, just negating the natural cycles of a woman's existence, the fact that we have these different stages of our lives and that we're supposed to be different and do different things at different times in our lives. It's very frustrating.
Can I add something there about hormones? So when I talk about the menstrual cycle, I talk about periods. These hormones that we're talking about are incredibly powerful. They affect us physically and mentally, for sure. We all know our monthly cycle. We all know about premenstrual syndrome, etc. And going through puberty, very powerful time for young girls, and obviously going through the menopause and pregnancy. So these hormones are incredibly powerful. They're oscillating around our body our whole reproductive years. And how I relate it, those years are like being in a turbulent ocean that's just all over the place, up and down. When you wake up in the morning, how are your hormones going to be today? And the thing is, for postmenopause, I always show a picture of a calm sea. For me, certainly, and for many, many women I've spoken to, it's gone. Those raging hormones doing what they do around our body have gone. And for me personally, I didn't want to replace them because they were always raging my body. I wanted to see what it was like without them. And for me personally, as I said, it's very individual. And I know I've seen so many women where HRT has revolutionized their life and they will not come off it. They love it. It's perfect for them. But for me, I wanted to see what it was like without it. And without it, I felt the best I've ever remember feeling in my life. I feel so calm. My kids might not say that, but I feel, and it's lovely to wake up every morning and feel the same. Not think, what am I going to feel like today? What are the estrogen and progesterone and everything else doing today? And just feeling calm. So I think for some women, we shouldn't be scared and we shouldn't be guilted into thinking we need to have these hormones forever. For some women, it's going to be a brilliant time without them. For some of them, it's going to be brilliant with them. And it doesn't matter. We are incredibly different. We've got different genetics. We've got different nutrition, different exercise regimes, different sleep. Sleep is one of the main factors. I've heard Anis Mukherjee say that, if we haven't slept, then everything else becomes really problematic. And so many of the issues women are seeing are accentuated at this time because we just haven't slept. So everyone's experience is going to be totally different. So we've got to embrace that, and we've got to figure out for us personally what works. And that's what we should do. We shouldn't be guilted into, the next woman's doing this, the other woman, this person on social media is saying this, I better do this, otherwise I'm going to get dementia, or I'm going to get this or whatever. So we've got to do what works for us, not what anyone else works for the next woman.
But what I like about MenoClarity is that what we're trying to do is bring together the objective sources of information so that women have that resource and they have information they can trust, and they have information that doesn't have an agenda. That, hopefully we don't have an agenda. We're trying to be as objective as we possibly can. We are a very wide and diverse group of people involved in this, and we're all very different, which I love about it. It's one of the things I love about this group. But I think it's very important that women have sources of information that they can trust so that they then can make decisions that are not swayed by fear. So we have our event coming up, don't we? And we're very excited about that. So we're having MenoClarity Live on Friday, September 29th. And if you're listening to this now, you can go to menoclarity.com/live event and you can sign up for your place. It's all free, and it's going to be a day where you get to hang out with us, and we'll have a giggle and we'll have a laugh, and hopefully we'll share some information that doesn't get talked about very much, like, for example, the impact of histamine on menopause symptoms. It's not something you hear a lot about, is it? Or Chinese response to menopause, and talking more about second spring, but also, Qigong and things like that to help us manage our menopause symptoms. Progesterone therapy, we hear a lot about combined hormone therapy and the role of estrogen, but we sort of see progesterone seems to be the backup really to estrogen, whereas we're going to be talking about how it can actually be quite powerful by itself. So there's all sorts of things we're going to be talking about. So I don't know if all of you just want to sort of tell me a little bit about why you're excited about the event coming up and what you hope we can achieve with it. Who wants to go first? Go on, Pat.
I'm really excited about it. That's why I've jumped in quickly, because between us we've got so many years, decades of knowledge about it, and the connections that we have, the people that we're able to bring into this summit, that will be so useful for women to hear different voices, to be able to hear different messages, not stuff they're seeing day to day on Instagram or Facebook, some really practical information that they still have to do their due diligence. They still have to think, is that right for me? As Joyce was saying, we're all individuals. We have to make our own decisions. But perhaps there's things you've never thought about, that you've never even heard about, that you didn't know existed. And, this summit might just introduce you to some of those things. And whenever we're together, we do have a laugh. So, yeah, it's going to be good.
Kate.
I think there's something special about this group. And that's because, you said it earlier, it's a very diverse group. So we all have different expertise in different areas and come from different places in the world. But what unites us is positivity and is this kind of clarity. And I do wonder also whether, I think many of us, not all of us, but many of us are postmenopausal, are in our second springs and summers. And I think that gives us a really clear objectivity. It's like, oh, the advantages of lower estrogen. That could be interesting. Maybe I would like to hypothesize that it gives us more ability to come together, to appreciate each other's diversity, to connect in a non-competitive way, and also to have a really objective view, because many of us have been through that experience. So we see the narrative. We're less soaked in the patriarchal marinade, perhaps.
And we're less biddable.
Definitely.
Always talking about estrogen as the biddable hormone, that makes us nurture everybody else.
And not ourselves.
Nobody ever talks about lions having menopause, although we now suspect that lions probably do. And wouldn't it be wonderful if somebody was going out there doing research who had to talk to postmenopausal lions? I'm imagining they're pretty feisty. It's probably why nobody goes and talks to them.
I might delegate that one.
Yeah. I think there's also giraffes and elephants are also possible contenders, aren't they?
Yeah.
Every living thing, I would think. Yeah. But I think I would echo what both Kate and Pat have said, that there's this great opportunity to show the balanced narrative. So there are some really strong scientific people like Joyce and Geraldine Pryor here. And on the other side, a holistic approach showing. And I think that's the narrative women do need to hear, that there is both sides, neither are 100% right, neither 100% wrong, that it's you can listen and we can also choose and construct for ourselves our own journey through menopause. And I hope that this will actually allow people to take things from it and think, how do I make my own menopause better, in my own way, make my own sort of little, package, if we like, from it. So I hope that they will get that, and that we're not competing and we have a positive spin on this. So exciting.
Joyce.
Yeah, the event's going to be really exciting. As we've heard, it's so good to hear different voices. I'm looking forward to educating people. I always, whenever I run events or speak at events, I want people to come away with some more knowledge. I certainly learned loads. I'm going to learn loads on the day for sure. And I think that's great. I think one great thing for being postmenopause, keep learning, keep expanding your knowledge, your experiences, everything. Expansion's really, really important. So yeah, I'm sure everyone's going to come away from the day. I also hope whenever I do meetings with groups of women, I want us to come away feeling very motivated and positive. That's a word that we've all used. Positive, motivated, having learnt something. I think it's going to be great. So well done, everyone.
So I think that brings us almost to the end of our podcast. Has anybody got anything else they would like to say about what we're doing and what it means to them? I'm just so excited. I think all of us felt we were kind of doing this in isolation, didn't we?
I'm really glad not to be the nutter in the corner who gets delegated to being Pollyanna all the time. Like, so, we're all really glum. Let's turn to Kate for some good news. And I'm like this party trick. All right, well, hang on.
You're the good weather report, aren't you?
Is it okay to say that I'm not deficient, that my body knows how to function, that my body has intelligence? So it feels really good to lean into other people who also have this narrative from all different kinds of backgrounds.
And I used to go into networking meetings, 12 years ago, mixed networking meetings, everybody eating their all-day breakfast at 7 o'clock in the morning. And I used to stand up and say, I'm Pat Duckworth, I'm the hot woman with cool solutions. They'd all go, what is she talking about? Who talks about menopause? That's not a business. Now it's like, oh, here she comes, the hot woman. And so now it's just so much more accepted. And I think the summit kind of sums that up, that it's okay for us to be together, talking about it, sharing knowledge. This is something that's not just for women. I'd encourage men to come. I'd encourage everybody to come, because there's always, as Joyce said, always something to learn. So come along and learn.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Magnificent Midlife Podcast. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe, follow, and share it. Also, giving a 5-star review really helps get the word out. You'll find the show notes at magnificentmidlife.com. That's also where you can get my book, Magnificent Midlife, Transform Your Middle Years, Menopause, and Beyond. Make the very best of your next chapter. Help me change the world, one magnificent midlife woman at a time.